Hey everybody, it's Jason from the Texas Gun Vault, and once again, it is Sunday, and that means it's time for the Texas Gun Vault Poll Question of the Week, a weekly vlog that I put out where I ask you as my viewers and subscribers about something that deals with guns, gun culture, current events, the news, politics, or maybe something fun like EDC that I want to get your thoughts and opinions on. And this week's question deals with bullpup rifles. Some of you might not even know what a bullpup rifle is, but we'll talk about that in just a moment. But bullpups have always had this kind of niche following. Some people love them, some people hate them. But what is a bullpup? Where does the name come from? I actually looked it up. They don't actually know where the name comes from. It just kind of seems to have evolved after World War II when it came to certain types of firearms where the action of the gun is in the stock or in the rear portion and the trigger group is ahead of that action. So there's like a linkage system. You probably would recognize some of these guns like the Steyr AUG, which is possibly the most famous of all of these bullpups. I believe it was featured in The Walking Dead by the character The Governor. It was also in Die Hard. So maybe you recognize that gun. But go online if you're not sure what a bullpup rifle is, go check them out and see what you think. But with all of that said, let's dive right into this week's question. This week's question asks about your thoughts on bullpup rifles. I was at a local gun shop recently and was looking at a Steyr AUG on the shelf when an employee and subscriber of the Texas Gun Vault approached me and really went in depth on his knowledge of various bullpup rifles, including the new Springfield Helion. I learned a lot and I was glad I got to handle a few of them at the store. I occasionally flirt with the idea of getting one. After this enlightening conversation, I think I will keep my bullpup purchase on the back burner for a while. Do you like the idea of bullpup style rifles? If so, why? If not, why? If you do own any, let us know which ones in the comments and what you like or dislike about them. The best analogy I think I've ever heard in regards to bullpup rifles is that they're an answer in search of a problem. I've always kind of looked at them this way. After all, what's wrong with an AR or AK or a standard rifle? Why do we have to move the action to the back of the gun and have this weird linkage system with the trigger? Ostensibly, people will say you can get 16-inch barrel ballistics, or even longer, in a gun that is very short. So you get the CQB qualities of maybe a short-barreled rifle, but you get the longer range and better ballistics out of a longer barrel. But with everything when it comes to guns, calibers, actions, locking mechanisms, everything has a pro and a con, and there's always a trade-off. So what's really the big trade-off when it comes to a bullpup rifle? After all, don't you want the better ballistics in a shorter gun? Well, yeah. Often, it has to do with a more complicated mechanism, and most importantly, the trigger mechanism, which often is more complicated and makes the trigger that much worse. Now, as I said, I've always flirted with the idea of buying a bullpup rifle. The one that I've always been the most fascinated with is the Steyr AUG. And by the way, a lot of people here in the United States call it the AUG, but in Europe, it's the AUG. You're supposed to say each letter instead of saying the word. I know, it's kind of weird, but that's what I heard. I could be wrong, but that's why I call it the AUG. But I finally really got to handle one at the gun store, and I'm sure glad that I did, because my interest in this rifle quickly diminished because the gentleman that I was talking to was like, pull that trigger. I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, pull that trigger. It was gritty, it was long, it was heavy, you couldn't really feel the brake, it had a horrible reset. And I guess when they convert the fully automatic to the semi-automatic trigger packs, it just doesn't work right. So much inside of this trigger pack is plastic, and so you have plastic engagement surfaces rubbing against other plastic engagement surfaces. It's not like it's metal on metal where things can be highly polished. And in the full auto AUGs, it's a progressive trigger. If you lightly pull it, it's semi-auto. And if you pull it a little bit further, it's full auto. It's not like an M16 where it has a safety selector switch. I also want to mention that often when I make these videos, I like to have some type of firearm right here, often if it relates to the topic at hand. But I don't have anything because I don't own any bullpups. And I was curious if you guys did and what you thought about them. Because as I said, I know I've always flirted with the idea of buying one, so I'm sure you guys have as well. And some of you guys have even pulled the trigger on one, pun intended. But with all that said, let's see what you guys said with this week's results. With 763 votes as of me filming this video, we have yes, they are innovative, great ballistics in a short package, 32%. Neutral, just another gun, I do not like or dislike them, 46%. No, they're a solution looking for a problem and have bad triggers, 19%. And something else, explain in the comments, 3%. So overall, we definitely have a mixed reaction. Maybe more people think they're better than not, but in general, the neutral won the day by a big margin. And I guess I would kind of have voted in that way if I voted in these polls, which by the way, I never do. I never comment because I don't want to skew the results or the top rated comments of the week. But yeah, if one is innovative, has a good trigger, a good manual of arms, easy to disassemble, and for me, has some type of collectability to it, well, I would definitely be interested. And for a long time, I thought that AUG really fit that bill, and then I picked one up and pulled that trigger, and I was like, ooh, this thing is terrible. Now, I did hear you can send that gun off to certain gunsmiths. I think someone said Ratworks does a really good job when it comes to replacing some of those internal plastic parts with metal parts and really refining the trigger, but I don't really want to buy a gun and then have to send it off to somebody. Then it's not really the way it came from the factory. As a collector, I like things to be stock, and man, I really don't want an AUG now. So what about the other guns that are on the market, like the Springfield Helion? Well, it's kind of the same issue. Some of the ergonomics of these guns I really like, especially with the new Helion. It kind of reminds me of a G36. You have that charging handle that's ambidextrous underneath that rail. It's really cool. You can charge it from the right or from the left. It has a really cool look. But once again, the trigger pull was it had a really long length of pull. Even with the telescoping stock fully collapsed, it's supposed to be the same length as an M16A2. That's really long, and it even extends further. So for a lot of people, it's not comfortable. Then we have the balance of these guns. So because the action is further back, sometimes they can be front heavy, sometimes they can be back heavy. Not many of them are very balanced, and I got to feel that as well. Arguably, the one that was the most balanced was probably the Springfield Helion, but it's still a really heavy gun considering that it's mainly made of polymer. Then there's the whole manual of arms and the ease of changing out magazines and safety selectors and it ejecting to the right or to the left. And a lot of these guns have to be ambi because after all, if the ejection port is on the right-hand side and you're a left-handed shooter, well, that brass is going to come right into your face. And so you have to be able to switch that over with ease. Some of them you can and some of them you can't. Then there's the issue of the magazines, having to load them from the back. Sometimes they have a little paddle release, just like an AK-47. Sometimes they're not compatible with Stenag magazines, like M16 magazines. Sometimes they're proprietary, like the Steyr AUG. Sometimes they have uppers or lowers that will work with different magazines. But then changing those magazines out can be quite difficult because you're really used to that push a button up here on the AR-15, the magazine drops. All the mechanical stuff is right here. But with a bullpup, it's separate. You have the trigger up here, magazine back here. You're having to reach further than you normally would. They say it can be very awkward. As I said, I've never shot one. I've never had to do a quick magazine change with them. And before I made this video, I actually went online to YouTube to see, well, what do other people say? And that was actually one of the biggest complaints. But let's go through each one of these and I'll give you guys my thoughts. We have, yes, they are innovative, great ballistics in a short package. And that's the big selling point, the great ballistics in a short package. They also look really cool. There is no doubt at all that when you see an AUG or the Helion or even the Tavor, you go, that is just one cool looking rifle. As a collector and someone that loves rifles and tactical looking things, well, I kind of want one just because of the way that they look. And then you get behind, you're like, this thing really doesn't offer anything that an M16 or AR-15 or AK-47 doesn't do already, and it's a little bit more awkward. It's a great idea. It's innovative. It's forward thinking. And that's something in the gun world that I really want to promote. I've talked a lot in the past about how certain guns like 1911s, and I know people that love 1911s are going to get me for this and saying it's not out of date. Well, that design as of me filming this video is 111 years old. It's still a great design. It's very reliable. It's been updated, but still, it's 111 years old. Come on, with time and technology, we can be a little bit more innovative. We don't want things to be stuck in the past. And I think the bullpups really do try to address this issue. They think outside the box. So I think from that perspective, they're really cool. It's just the execution of that idea that I don't think really pans out for me personally. Then we have neutral, just another gun. I do not like or dislike them. And as I said, this is the one I probably would have voted for because after all, I want to judge each guns on the merit of that gun. I know some people say I have something out for certain brands, whether it be Springfield because of their push for gun control in the past or their kind of shading dealings with politicians from Illinois, or it has to do with Kel-Tec because I think that they're junk. Well, I've had them fall apart at the range, but who knows, maybe one day I'll shoot a Kel-Tec and absolutely love it. And I will say that I love it and admit that I love it. I've shot a lot of Kel-Tecs and I haven't had that experience yet. It doesn't mean I won't in the future. And so that's kind of the way maybe bullpups will be. I really want to shoot one. Okay, I think I have shot a Tavor in the past, maybe about one magazine, but it's not enough to really leave a great impression in my mind. I do remember it was a very gassy gun. So when I shot that, of course, you have the ejection port right here by your face. You smelled all the gas. You felt it. And I didn't like that either. But that was only one magazine. So I don't really have enough experience to say I don't like it, but I don't have enough experience to say I do like it either. They're just kind of neutral. They're cool. I flirt with the idea of getting one, but I always pass on them. Then we have no, they're a solution looking for a problem and have bad triggers. I kind of thought this one would actually get more votes because when you actually shoot one of these things or pull the trigger and dry fire one of these things, man, the triggers universally are heavy and long and gritty. And that's just because you have to have such long connecting parts between the trigger and the mechanism in the back at the chamber that it just is not very conducive to that light, crisp trigger pull. Personally, I'm a big fan when it comes to engineering of the KISS principle. Keep it simple, stupid. You want fewer parts, you want smaller parts, and you don't want anything that's overcomplicated because the more parts you have in the system, the more likely it's not going to work right and it's harder to tune. So KISS, keep it simple, stupid. And unfortunately, just because of the physics of the gun, bullpups are not that way. Then we have something else explained in the comments, only 3%. So for the most part, people were like, I like him, I don't like him, or I'm neutral. There wasn't really a lot of this middle ground. So that's my thoughts on all this. Let's see what you guys had to say with this week's top rated comments. And the top rated comment from this week comes from Grand Theft Avocado, who says, my biggest surprise was liking the Kel-Tec RDB enough to buy one. It throws the brass downward and is the only truly ambi bullpup. And it has an adjustable gas system and is extremely simple internally. The trigger is awesome as well. Okay, so this is somebody saying that the trigger is awesome on a bullpup. So maybe I'll have to try one out. I have heard good things about this particular gun, and I will always give one a try if I have one in for review. Then we have Alex Glenn, who said, I think they're a fantastic concept that has yet to be perfected. The MDRX checks a lot of boxes but still has issues. Well, that's also another great bullpup that I've heard a lot of good things about. But let's be honest about this. Bullpups have been around since post-World War II. Now, granted, they didn't really get a big jump and boost until the 1970s when the AUG came out. But you would think in that time, 40, 50 years, well, they could have perfected it by now. Every gun has a learning curve when it comes to its engineering. Glock, the 1911, all of the standard designs. They all go through a little bit of evolution, and eventually they kind of find that groove. I don't think the bullpup ever has, and after this amount of time, I don't think it ever will. Then we have Tyler Sorensen, who says, they solve some problems while creating others that don't exist in regular rifles. As always, it depends on your purpose. And he's absolutely right. There's that trade-off. You get that shorter package with better ballistics. But then you get that worst trigger. You have the issue with the ejection. Well, you got to be able to change it from one side to the other. And if you can't do that easily and you're a left-handed shooter, well, you might be SOL. There's just a lot more complexity to a bullpup just because of its design. So he has a really good point there. Then we have Laser222 who says, all in all, I'm pretty neutral on them. Probably tend to disfavor most of them, but will say the AUG is one great looking firearm and definitely my favorite bullpup, hands down. Well, I'm going to give him a little piece of advice. Go try one out. Maybe you have. I felt the same way. I still think it looks really cool. Look at those new AUG A3s. They're sweet, especially with the FDE stock. But after pulling that trigger, man, I'm not dropping $2,000 on one of those things. And then finally we have XJRob85 who says, I like the idea of them, but every time I research one, I find out all these awkward operational details that make me question their utility. Outside of my practical defensive guns, AR-15, Glock, etc., I mostly focus on buying iconic designs that have stood the test of time. Because of that, if I were to buy one, it would absolutely be the AUG. It's just low on my priorities right now. And I think him and I are feeling the same way. If I had the opportunity to buy an AUG, which is the one I would probably look at, even though it has this horrible trigger, if I got it for the right price, I might do it. But I'm not going to pay the current prices that they are now. And are those prices ever going to come down? Probably not. So me ever owning an AUG is something that's probably never going to happen. And before I wrap this video up, I do want to thank somebody else who got the 6th highest rated comment, and that goes to Sean H. And Sean wrote this really lengthy comment. So go back to the original poll, go see what he has to say. It's more than I can discuss here, but he goes in depth, and I agree with almost everything he says. So thank you, Sean. You were 6th in line this week, and it was a great comment, but it is really long. All right, so that is my thoughts. I like them. I don't like some things about them. I'm neutral on most of them. And maybe for the right price, I would buy one, but as a collector, I only want certain ones. I don't know. I just don't think it's high on my priority list. There's so many guns I want before that. The prices aren't coming down, so I doubt I'll ever get one. So that's my thoughts on bullpup rifles and the Texas Gun Vault poll question of the week. It is great to get your responses. Sometimes I feel pretty good about how I feel about things because you guys agree with me. And sometimes I know I'm in the minority and you guys disagree. But I love having these discussions. And if you want to participate in next week's poll question, please go to the community tab of my YouTube page. I will also post a link in the description below. Go click that. Go see what the poll is about. Make sure that you vote, comment, and like other people's comments so we can get the top rated comments of the week. So, did I get it right? Did I get it wrong? Let me know in the comments section below. And as always, thanks for watching.